James Thompson. I'm a professor of political science here at Hiram College.
And I'm Kathy Leschek, the director of the Garfield Institute for Public Leadership.
And we were fortunate enough recently to take a bunch of our Garfield scholars to Cuba. And we've made a short video about that experience. And so without further ado, here you go. So how has your vision of what U.S. policy towards Cuba, how has that changed since now that you've been to the island? Has it changed, and if so, how?
It definitely has changed. Before going to Cuba, I was really unsure whether or not the embargo should be lifted. I had my reasons for it to be lifted and reasons not. But after going to Cuba, I definitely could see a lot more benefit for both the Cuban people and the Americans in lifting the embargo, and it's something that I think more people need to look into, and there's definitely a lot more to it.
For me, before going to Cuba, I was very confused, as in I knew I had my sources, like I was going online trying to see like what's going on in Cuba, getting as much information on both sides, US and Cuba, and trying to understand that where things stand. And I was confused as to whether the embargo should be lifted or not. And honestly, going there increased my confusion, because I felt as if no matter what it is, it's really like these policies that policymakers make. The people who get the most hurt in this whole entire process are the average, citizens. And for me, like that really hurts me. And for me, like just to understand that what U.S. policy towards Cuba should be, I think both countries know in the past that they've done, that they've equally done, stuff to harm each other's reputation in one way or the other. But for me, just to move towards together, like move towards like a specific goal together is essential. So that's what I would say.
It definitely has. Just being there, you start to realize that the regime uses the embargo as a crutch for a lot of their inefficiencies. So if the embargo were to be taken away, I think that it would bring the regime down, because they would no longer have a crutch to lean on as to why a lot of stuff's not getting done, why residents don't have a lot of money.
So what was something that you didn't anticipate that you found when you got there that really surprised you, that was the opposite of what you would have expected?
Well, before going to Cuba, I had a chance to read some Cuban literature, and I read this play called La Mariposa, and that was what my paper was about. And they discussed the social problems and the culture that was integrated in each and every life of a single, general Cuban. And when I went there, I never expected that, that would actually be the case, because I thought that it's a literature and people try to, bring those elements in as part of a story created. But that creative nonfiction was actually present while we went there. So I think that whole idea of that culture with those social problems, yet people living, that life, I think that was really, I did not anticipate that. And I think that was really beautiful to see, that happening right in front of me, where I've read the same play where they're talking about the Malecon, and that is written in the play, and I go there and we're experiencing that, and people sitting, on the Malecon, and living the life with the social problems, and I think that was one of the most beautiful and unanticipated, things.
I would definitely say that the death of Hugo Chavez was the most memorable thing that happened while we were in Cuba. The Cubans rely so heavily on Venezuela, or they relied so heavily on Venezuela prior to the death of Hugo Chavez. He supplies most, if not all, of their oil that they use for everything, including just generating electricity. The death of Hugo Chavez created such a different feeling. It created a tension in the air. I remember I was sitting in a restaurant, and on the TV it showed up that he had passed away, and there was just this somber feeling. All the waiters were walking around with their heads down, and store owners were crying, and our tour guide was just saying that it was the most influential event that had happened in his lifetime, and I feel like it would almost be like being a foreigner in America on September 11th. It was such a traumatic event for the Cubans.
So what for you was the most memorable moment on this trip?
I think the entire trip was memorable, in one way or the other, because for me, just going into the lives of these people, may it be education when we went to the primary school, or going to the the entrepreneur who just started, like, you know, who got the license to have his own motel kind of, you know, establishment, and then going and seeing these private agriculture, like, you know, the land was owned by the government, but they were really farmers who were growing crops, you know, which were organic. And I think that whole idea of like sinking into the system and, you know, getting a chance to actually expose, you know, ourselves to, like, you know, without any shields or without any, you know, like without any glass in between, you know, to all these people. I think that was one of the most memorable experiences. I think I was very emotional because, you know, like for me, I felt no matter what we think, it's a people to people, you know, like a person to person, you know, when personal contact is present, that's where you learn the most. So for me, that was like the whole trip was memorable just because of this whole personal contact that we had.
And there was this one moment when we were in the streets and I was speaking to this woman and she spoke broken English, but it was fairly well. And I had told her I was an American and she thought I looked like a ballerina. So she just started dancing with me and I expected her just, you know, to give me the cold shoulder as an American. However, she was so friendly and outgoing that this moment really took me by surprise. And I guess just the fact that they don't hate us as the American people.
One of the most memorable learning experiences for me in Cuba was sitting out on the beach one night with the whole group, and we were having a discussion of what we thought of the trip so far and the experiences so far, and we talked about all the intermingling between like the education and the healthcare system and economy, and I just sort of sat there and I never really considered how these things are all related. And as we, you know, tossed ideas back and forth, it really became clear to me that the things that I knew and the things that I was learning were all related, and I knew a lot more than I thought I did.
Me voy pa'l